Good evening, and welcome to Practical Conversations, conversations for the life of the church. The life of the church includes not only its proclamation, but also the vibrancy of its people in the promotion and enhancement of the kingdom of God. Practical Conversations intends to engage conversations of practice and theology with persons currently working in the church at various levels and engaged in these issues. Our goal is to both inform and engage those who are actively seeking to enhance God's kingdom through the use of their gifts. Tonight's conversation centers around Dr. Hanna R. Broome. She is the president of the North Carolina Council of Churches, the national director of religious affairs for repairs of the breach, and the director of Project 100, which we will talk about later. Her article in this issue of the Quarterly Review is entitled The Moral Imperative of Civil Engagement for the Black Church, a Call to Action. This article states the need and necessity of civic engagement within our communities of both the church and its people. In her article, she says that the participation in both civic and political life is not just a choice, but a responsibility deeply entwined with the church's mission. We've invited her here this evening to discuss this responsibility, particularly as we approach November 5th. Dr. Broome, welcome to Practical Conversations.
Hello, Dr. Broadnax. Thank you so very much for inviting me into this space to have this conversation with you and with the virtual audience.
Well, we're so happy to have you tonight. As I said, your article states that it is not just a choice of the church, but a responsibility of the church to be engaged in both political and civil life as a part of the church's mission. Explain to us how you see political and civic engagement as a part of the mission of the church.
Well, I mean, that's a very loaded question. Not
Yes,
necessarily
okay, thank you.
this full. That would be something that you would give me. If we look at the mission of the church, what is exactly is it? It's not just a meeting group. It's not just a meeting space. It's not just a state of being, but it truly is the mission of the church is to lift up those that are downtrodden, that are marginalized, to help change society for the better. We are to be active agents of a beloved community. Well, what is the beloved community? Well, we see the humanity of each person. Their civic rights should not be taken away from them simply because they're different, simply because they're different denominations, simply because they're different ethnicity. And so that's part of the church becoming that beloved community. It's a holistic mission of the church. It's not separate from our Christian discipleship. It's an essential part of it. And we are to be followers of the way, followers of Jesus, as we were in the Acts 2. Everybody talks about we need to be an Acts 2 type of church. That means that we brought all of our things to the community so that nobody was without. Part of the church is to walk humbly, love justice, and be pleasing before the Lord. These are things that are part of our mandate as being followers to having our faith. And the Black church, specifically the Black church, has been the birthplace for all societal changes. So from the civil rights, from women's suffrage. So we even partnered and worked with our Hispanic Latino brothers in knowing how to have a civic engagement with our churches and our faith leaders. So it is part of our mandate. So
many of us have heard that our mission as a church is to save souls. That's what we're about. All we need to do is to go out and preach the gospel and to save souls. Where does this other stuff come from?
How are you going to save a soul if they're dying? How are you going to preach them for? How are you going to preach heaven where your people are barely surviving? You talk about the bread of heaven, the bread of life, and they don't even have bread at home. They can't even afford the bread to bring it home. So how are we going to save a soul that's hungry? Hungry for the word, that's great, that's amazing. But if my stomach is grumbling, I'm physically hungry. And what is the church doing to help me? How is the church advocating for me for living wages? How is the church advocating for my children to have a sound education? How is my church advocating and lifting me up in just my civic rights and my duties? So yes, absolutely, you're supposed to save the soul, but the soul is embodied in a body. I got to take care of that body as well. It's not just one part of it, but the church's mission is the holistic, the whole mind, body, and spirit. So if we're dealing with the soul, just the souls, then you're going to watch your people suffer and struggle. You're going to watch them talk about heaven when they're struggling in hell. My favorite line in The Color Purple, when Sophia was coming through the cornfield to Celie, and Celie told her, don't worry, just endure for a little bit. I'm paraphrasing. Heaven will be here. And Sophia said, think about heaven later. Bash Mr.'s head in and think about heaven later. That's what we're talking about, the constant, the right here. Heaven is going to be there. I ain't trying to rush to it. I know it's there, but I got to help my people here. He has given me that mandate. He's given me that calling and purpose.
Well, I kind of hear what you're saying, but a lot of us church folk, if it's not in the Bible, we don't want anything to do with it. So where in the Bible can you give me justification for being engaged in civic life?
Oh, Jesus. Okay. Are we going to start with Genesis, or are we going to start in New Testament?
You can start anywhere you like.
Even in Genesis. Okay, let's start in the Old Testament. Let's start in the Old Testament. Moses. Everybody knows Moses. Everybody, let my people go. They were enslaved, right? They were enslaved. They were starving. They were being beaten. They had no workers' rights. They didn't have no health care. They were poor. They were living off scraps. And so Moses was a liberator. All right, that's one instance. We talk about Amos all the time, come January and February, because we quote Martin Luther King, let justice roll down like a river and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. Amos was denouncing social injustice and calling for righteousness when he was saying that. Micah 6 and 8, I think that's what it is. I always have to go back. My scriptural verbatim is my weakest spiritual discipline, so y'all don't judge me. Micah, he emphasizes ethical living when he says, he has shown you, oh mortal, what is good. What does the Lord require of you? To act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly. Isaiah tells you a societal reform is what Isaiah was saying in chapter 1, where it says, learn to do right, seek justice, defend the oppressed. Okay, we in the Old Testament. Even Jesus.
Who would you say?
Jesus.
Okay.
5'3", brown-skinned, sable-skinned Palestinian Jew who was born to undocumented parents, who was poor, but his whole mission was to lift the oppressed, to set the captives free, and to heal the brokenhearted. How are we going to heal him? He didn't ask for a copay. He didn't ask for anything. He said, come to me, all who are heavy laden and burdened. He even turned over the table. Everybody loves that scripture about turning over the tables. But if you dig a little deeper from the surface, what he was doing was resetting the order of the societal of cleansing the temple. Was not only just a physical context, but he was going against societal norms of exploitation of the poor. So we going associated with the outcast. Who associated with the outcast? Jesus did. He dined with the tax collectors, breaking social barriers and promoting inclusivity. He promoted that. When he talked to the woman at the well, everybody talks about her bucket. Nobody talks about the conversation. He changed the context of having open conversation with what was considered deemed ugly and dirty and hate. They were against each other. Two ethnic groups from the same father. If you go down the genealogy, it was just a separation of a couple people. But he talked about that part, inclusivity. That means male and female. There's no Greek, there's no Jew, there's no slave, there's no free. We became free with just that statement. But so how are we going to say that Jesus is not political? How are we going to say that we're not following in his footsteps if we are not helping change societal injustices, if we're not calling it out? We're supposed to have the prophetic voice. Where's the prophetic voice if you're staying silent in the pews and in the public square? So yes, if you're going to be emulation of Jesus, if you want to emulate him and walk in the authority that he has given us, then you should be speaking out against all these injustices. A silent ally is the enemy. We need faith leaders. We need faith communities to speak up, speak out, and stand up and stand out. Do not be afraid. Quit saying that he has given us a spirit of fear. That's on the inside in your protected stained glass walls. We need you to say that same thing in the midst of darkness that's being legislated in our general assemblies, in our White House. That's what we need. That spirit of fear to be going away. Sorry, I know I talk fast and I get passionate when it comes to
that. Your passion is welcomed here. We welcome all who are joining us tonight for this practical conversation in the life of the church. Our guest tonight is Dr. Hanna R. Broome. She is here to talk about the church's responsibility in political and civic engagement. You've heard her speak about that and the biblical foundations for that. If you have any questions that you would like to ask Dr. Broome, if you place those in the chat, we will get to as many questions as we can. Dr. Broome, you're just speaking about the ministry of Jesus amongst the poor, the downtrodden, those who are marginalized. Should the church engage the same mission that Jesus did, or is the church only supposed to sit on a hill someplace and just look pretty?
Absolutely not. He tells you, I've given you the authority. He says, greater works will you do. Why do we keep saying those scriptures if we don't walk in it? If he can set the captives free, and he says, that's what's been given to me, that's what I've been anointed to do, then we're not just anointed to preach in a pulpit. Preaching the good news actually means operating in setting captives free. That's their civic rights, those things that are being oppressed, those that are in the margins. A lot of people say, well, what about Paul? Paul told Philemon, he said, do not even treat the slave I'm sending you as a slave, but treat him as a brother. He even tells us, the scriptures from Genesis to Revelation even tells us to take care of the stranger, to accept the foreigner.
So no. We deport foreigners, right?
No. We're supposed to love the foreigners because we were once foreigners in this land. So, and then also, how can we have I hate to say this, double racism against those that are coming, or they need to earn their turn? I've heard this from Black clergy. Let them earn their turn like we earned it. We didn't earn our turn. We got brought over here and we fought for our turn. And now that we know how it is to have our children pulled apart from us, how we've had our rights, our voices completely silenced, we're now going to say that we are God's children when we look at other of God's creation going through the same exact trauma that we're having, and we say earn our turn? No, we are supposed to walk. That is part of taking care of a soul of our brothers and our sisters. Even Jesus' scripture tells us, who is your neighbor? Everyone is our neighbor. Everyone.
Let me ask this. For the small, now, for those who don't know, Dr. Broome's originally from South Carolina, and I don't mean the big city either. Right. So for those churches, those small rural churches, how can they be civically engaged? I mean, we can look at a major church like First Church Brooklyn or even Mother Zion, but how can a rural church, how can a small church be engaged in the life of their community?
Oh my goodness. So even a small church can, your neighbors, if your neighbors are struggling, you can begin to have conversation. A lot of people are not going to come to the church and say, I'm dealing with something. Some may, some won't. But if you know that there is an issue in your community, in your rural community, we've had the farmers that have not had the SNAP, their aid was taken from them. Okay, so if you have that resource, if you've been sitting at a table that knows that these particular people are being ostracized or oppressed, then it's up to you to speak for them. They might not be at that table that you're able to talk to. They might not be able to get to the congressman or the council, the city council. They might not be able to get to the county commissioner, but you can, saying, hey, we have people in this rural area that are starving. We have people in this rural area that did not receive the aid that the state had for them. What can I do to help them? And then get in your car and start having conversations. Pick them up. They might not be able to get to these meetings, but you can bring them to this meeting and have that testimony. Testimony changes lives, and it also changes policy. So
now,
that's what church can do.
Now, what meetings are you talking about? You're talking about the trustee meeting, the class meeting?
We're not even talking about inside of that church. We're talking about go and pick up your neighbor and take them to a city council meeting. Take them to a school board meeting. Take them to have a meeting with a county commissioner. You as a citizen who has voted, paid taxes, have a right to have a conversation with any elected official. You have that right. Whether you got to write them an email, write them a letter, you have a right to have a conversation with your elected officials. Do not believe the hype say they don't have the time. You got them in the office, whether you voted or didn't vote. Either way, they were in that office. They are an elected official that is a representative of you as a constituent. You have a right to have a conversation with them. You have a right to tell them your grievances. So that's the meetings I'm talking about. I love class leader meetings. Do not get me wrong. I'm not talking about you not having a trustee meeting, but how about have a trustee meeting at a city council meeting and tell them how you're overcharging water prices, how you're not bringing in resources into this community, how that we have used eminent domain as a mafia style tactic of the government to take over buildings and places into Black and brown communities. We got to begin to have that conversation at tables that are making those decisions.
Great. Let me push you a little further. You mentioned that we got persons into office if we voted for them or if we didn't vote for them. Well, voting doesn't really matter. It doesn't really change anything. Why should we vote?
Oh my gosh. Why should you vote? Not only we're not even going to go to the history of the right for us as African Americans to vote. We're not even going to go there. I'm going to bring it to current present. Everybody talks about the Electoral College, right? Everybody says that's why the system is rigged. But if you begin to look at how many votes make up one Electoral College vote, you'll realize how much your vote counts. For instance, and please fact check me on this. There is 150,000 that makes up one electoral vote. I think in South Carolina.
Yeah, I think that's
somewhere around in there. 150,000 makes up one electoral vote in South Carolina. But almost 1 million who were eligible to vote back in 2020 did not vote. How many electoral votes was that 1 million that chose not to vote? You could have changed South Carolina. You could have changed North Carolina. You could have changed Arizona. The margin of victory for Arizona was 1.3%. That's less than 10,000 votes. So you're telling me your vote doesn't count? 46 minus 1 won. He won by 75,000 votes, not millions, 75,000 votes. But over almost 6 million people who were eligible to vote chose not to vote. And I'm erring on the side of underestimating and not overestimating. So we're talking over 6 million people who were eligible to vote in 2020 chose not to vote. And the margin of victory for 46 minus 1 was 75,000. So you're telling me your vote doesn't count? And we can get down, if we narrow it down even further into city council or any type of government, we're talking between 100 votes, or I think North Carolina had a fight between 5 votes. So you're telling me your vote doesn't count? It does count. It does count. Do not believe the hype that your vote does not count. If your vote didn't count, why do they keep suppressing it? If your vote didn't count, why did they gut out the Voting Rights Act of 1965? If your vote didn't count, why do they continue? I think we have 28 states now that have some form of voter suppression law. And then it's almost 1,000 bills since 2020 that have been introduced as voter suppression. So if your vote doesn't count, why don't they want to count it? If your vote doesn't count. So
the church should help people to vote.
Yes, absolutely. And do not, again, believe the hype that it affects your 501c3. It does not. That is another one of those, I call them guerrilla tactics, to divide people and also put them in fear of what they're doing. It does not. You're not standing in a pulpit or at that church saying, vote for this person or vote for this way. You're really saying, educate yourself so you can make an educated vote. So yes, the church should be registering people to vote. The church should be taking people to the ballot. Souls to the polls. That was an amazing initiative several years ago. But now we're thinking the souls take their own self to the polls. No, you still as a church, crank up the vans, do a carpool. If y'all can grab and get into a car to go eat, you're telling me y'all can't grab each other, get into a car and go vote? We will have happy hour, but we will not have a happy time at the polls. We have to begin to be active, not reactive. I don't want to wait till there's another dead body to say we need sound gun legislation. I don't want to wait till there's a child that's hurt or harmed and say, oh, we need better background checks. Why wait till it happens when we could be proactive to prevent it? We may not get everything through, but 80-20. If I get 80% that will lift up all people that have been marginalized, ostracized, oppressed, 80%, then I'm good. I'll work with the 20%. But if 80% of our vote lifts people up, gives them human dignity, gives them living wages, helps the poor become less poor, and then also keeps my democracy, then yeah, I'm going to vote. I'm going to help vote for the 80%.
We welcome those who are joining us tonight. If you have questions for Dr. Broome, put those in the chat, and we will try to answer as many questions as we can. Dr. Broome, I'm quoting from your article now. Civic engagement provides opportunities for our members to develop leadership skills, take on active roles in the fight for justice, and participate in meaningful actions that reflect our values. Talk about the development of leadership within the local church and how that leadership should reflect our values.
Okay, so when I began Project 100, I guess I got to give a little context to why I made that statement. People thought that they had to be part of Christian education, or they had to be a missionary, or they had to have a title given to them to become a civic engager. And when I began to tell them, no, you just have to be a concerned citizen, a concerned parent, a concerned person about how this world is being ran, how the legislation is being passed. And so from Project 100, we've had several people who have actually ran for office, who've actually said, you know what, I want to be a part of the city council. I'm gonna give her a shout out, Josephine Powell on the West Coast. I think she's getting ready to run for office. Praise God, we got to support her and celebrate her. But she started at Project 100. And she said, because of Project 100, because of learning how to have conversations, learning how to talk to our elected officials, learning how to even write a petition, made her hungry for wanting to be a part of the change. And so there are several others that have begun. They don't have no position in the church. They've been sitting on the pews, but they know how to go out into the community and have conversation and engage people. What are you worried about? What are you dealing with? They've been able to not only started out with the script, but now it's just almost their everyday conversation. And how do we help change this world? How can I become a part of that? So they become actually civic engagers. I want to say civic changers in a sense. And that leadership gave them boldness from Project 100, and also their faith value, their faith in being somebody who can actually change society. That's an amazing, amazing gift that we have. And we have to empower people to do it.
You mentioned Project 100, what is that? The wall behind you says Project 100. Tell us what Project 100 is and how it got started.
Project 100 got started with Bishop George D. Crenshaw, became president of the Board of Bishops in February of 2020. And his main goal during his tenure as president was to have 100% active engagement of the stateside A.M.E. Zion churches. Now, we'll talk about overseas in a minute, but the stateside, and that was an election year, 2020. And so that's how it began. We got over, I think, 10,000 voters that year that were from each church. So we had maybe 90% I'm gonna give us 90, and I'm grading on the curve. Grading on the curve. 90% of those that were part of Project 100 and their churches actively engaged. Now, we didn't get all of our churches, but we got a good part of them getting engaged and actually getting hungry for how do I now begin to keep my church civically engaged. So that was the beginning of Project 100. So after the election, people were still wanting to know, okay, now what do we do? We got everybody voted. We got people in that we wanted. We got people that were there, that we didn't choose, but they're there. How do we now shift that to accountability? And so Project 100 shifted from just being a voter registration, voter engager tool to now being civic engagement resource for the A.M.E. Zion Church. And that from 2020 to now, we have this is another run of registering people to vote, especially targeting our new voters. It became, how do I begin to write to my elected official? How do I send in my information so I can have time at a city council meeting? How do I now begin to be a part of our school boards? So it became a civic engagement resource tool for people to how they continue to be alerted on legislation change. How do I even do a non-violent protest? That's how Project 100 evolved into, and then also how to help people run for office. We need more moral leaders, moral being righteous leaders, and not righteous to oppress people, actually righteous to uplift people. And so that's the mode, the engine, the tool that Project 100 has become.
Great, thank you. Is Project 100 still operating today? How is Project 100 involved in the current election?
Yes, we've been going strong. We've been going since 2020. We shifted from every month we still are every month. As we go in these last few months, because of the political climate that we're in, we actually started doing twice a month, where we're getting more people, more new people, more young people involved in the voting process, democracy in itself, and understanding what misinformation is, understanding guerrilla tactics, understanding the divisiveness of just language. You'll see people that we're trying to do this month is getting voting plans. A lot of people, like I told you earlier, we can register people to vote, but can we get the ballot? Can we get them to cast that ballot? So we have shifted from voter registration. We're continuing to register people to vote, but now how do we have a voting plan in picking up the people that we registered to vote? How are we getting that information out to people that don't look on social media? Just because you post on social media does not mean it gets to the neighborhoods that it needs to get to. Just because you send it to a text to everybody knows that community person that knows everybody. Just because you got it to them does not mean it got into the ears of other people. We need to be able to go into barbershops, hair salons, go to stores, and leave messages from our church saying, hey, we're picking people up at this time to take them to vote, because transportation has become a barrier to people casting their ballot. So that's what Project 100 is doing in these last few weeks, is getting churches in a voting plan, how to pick people up. Shout out to the HBCUs that we have visited and have communicated with, and churches are pairing with HBCUs to get those students to the polls that do not have a polling station on their campus. So shout out to the Livingstone. I got to give Livingstone a shout out because
the greatest HBCU in the country.
Livingstone, a shout out. President Davis, Mrs. Stevenson has not only that protocol, but a system, amazing system of, as freshmen come onto the campus, they are registered to vote. So I didn't have a problem asking them about being registered to vote. What was one of the barriers was getting the students to the polls. And so we are working with those churches in Salisbury. Shout out to our presiding elder Garrison that is helping with me working with those churches to get those kids to the polls. That's another thing that we've been doing with Project 100, connecting HBCUs who do not have a polling station on campus with churches around around their communities that can pick those young people up and getting them to cast their ballots. That's the barrier. A lot of people say young people don't vote. They do vote if you can help them get to the polls.
Thank you. We're happy to have you join us tonight for this practical conversation. Our topic tonight is the Church and Civic Engagement. Our guest is the Reverend Dr. Hanna R. Broome, who is the director of Project 100, which we were just discussing, but she is also the National Religious Director for Repairers of the Breach. We were just discussing Project 100 and getting persons out to the polls. We know that our election is on November 5th, so that on November 6th, all of this is over. We don't have to do anything else. Isn't that right?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. There's beyond the ballot. Beyond the ballot. So after we get people elected, whether by choice of choosing to vote or not vote, they're in this elected position. They're in this elected office. They are a representation of you. They're a representation of the constituency that is under them. So now you got to hold them accountable. We've allowed them to come into our churches and give the 10,000 elevator speech, and then they disappear. The reason why they keep coming to the church is because they know the power of the Black church. They know the power of church, period, because you are a hub. You are a community hub. So after the election, you need to get a list of all your election officials, get their contact information, that's all public information, and begin to reach out to them. Hello, my name is such and such and such and such. I am part of your constituency in this district, in this area, and begin to hold them accountable. You said during your campaign that these are the things that you're standing for. Me as a concerned citizen, me as a registered voter, is going to hold you accountable to this. And so you begin to send emails, let them know who you are. Do you know you can actually go into their office? There are news people sitting around waiting for a story. So if you knock on that door and they don't answer you, and there's a news person right there, you can just say, you know what, I'm a concerned citizen and I wanted to talk to Representative such and such. And this representative said that they were going to stand on this, and this during their campaign. And now we're having this issue. We're having this gentrification. We're having this under-resourced area. And they said that they were going to help. I want to know what the plan is. And so there's news people that are waiting around to hear what these elected officials are not doing based off of what they ran their campaign on. So that's beyond the ballot. Making sure these elected officials are held accountable. They are to be held accountable. Bring them out, call them out, speak on the injustice that they're sitting there legislating or overlooking. And when they abstain from a vote, that's still a vote. So if they abstain from something that is very important to you, living wages, healthcare, abstaining lets you know where they stand. That's something they want to put their head in the sand.
How will we know whether or not they've abstained, or how do we know how they're voting in their legislative bodies?
All of that is public record. So you can go on wherever you're at and wherever that meeting is, and you can see the notes of that meeting on that .gov based off whatever state you're on. Even your city council has a .gov website, and also where you can see the minutes. So you can see where they voted and not voted. That's public record. And you can see where they abstained from whatever vote that was put before them.
Is that hard to find? Is it difficult to search, or is it rather easy?
It's not hard, but if you join Project 100 meetings, you'll be able to find that information. We can help you with it.
Oh, that was a good segue. Tell us how to join your Project 100's meetings.
All right, so we're having the last one before the election this Sunday. We've had it was the first and the third month, but since a lot of people are really wanting to tighten up their voting plan, I'm going to have one more impromptu one this Sunday before election to work on voting plans, how to get that information out, how to connect with people. So I can put the send Dr. Broadnax and also Mr. Darren Kent links to the meetings. They are going to be on the 1st and the 3rd. And then after the election, we're going to take a break to breathe. After inauguration, once we make sure everybody is into their offices, and then we will begin beyond the ballot. So that'll go from 1st and the 3rd back to the 1st of each month that we'll have monthly meetings.
So what you're advocating for here is civic engagement, not just as we approach elections, but I think what you're saying is that the importance of the election emphasizes the need for civic engagement after the election.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Why would we elect somebody and then just go away? We put forth all that effort to elect a person based off of what the information that we were given. And we just don't walk away. We make sure that we hold them accountable. Your sheriff is an elected office. If you see a lot of police brutality, a lot of racial profiling, you need to go to your sheriff and begin to have a conversation saying, hey, y'all are over militarizing this community. Why? Because most likely is an under-resourced Black and brown marginalized community. We have to hold their foot to the fire, all those other cliches, but hold them accountable. You are a citizen of these yet United States, and you have a right to be able to say what you're doing is wrong. What you're doing is an injustice to all. You have that right. Why do we keep our voices silent? And then when something happens, we're ready to cry out to the heavens. Well, haven't been crying out. We should have been active. We should have been engaged. I don't want to see another young brother dead. That's my son. So if I can help with police profiling or police brutality before that, that's less of a child in the streets off of some imaginary threat in a car or walking down the street or playing with a gun, a toy gun. So let's be proactive. And being proactive is holding these people accountable in these elected office, from county general, your clerk of courts, your coroner, all of these elected offices. You can hold each one of them accountable. And that's what beyond the ballot is. That's why we should not sleep. Stay woke. That's a real term. Stay woke. I don't need you taking naps on this government. I don't need you, having a face of, what is that disease? Narcolepsy. I don't need you knocking off at most pivotal times. We need to be watchful. We are supposed to be the watchmen. Let us not be like the disciples when Jesus going in there to pray and he come on, y'all can't even stay awake while I go pray just for a few minutes. No, we need to stay watchful, because what has been happening, what we're seeing now is almost like we're seeing the tree out of the ground, this Christian nationalism and all of these banning of books and all this. This is not just happening. This is almost 20 years in the making of intentional moves in places. We're just seeing the sprouting of it. But the root has been there. And so that's why we can't sleep. That's why we have to stay woke. That's why we have to keep engaging. We cannot have apathy after the ballot. We cannot have that.
Let me quote from your article again. The impact of civic engagement within our community is far-reaching, extending well beyond the walls of our churches and into broader society. We play a critical role in shaping a more just and equitable society by actively challenging injustices and advocating for necessary policy changes. This work is not only vital for our own communities, but also essential for addressing the systemic issues that continue to disproportionately affect marginalized populations, including racial discrimination, economic inequality, and unequal access to essential services. You state that in the article, and we're hoping that everyone will receive their this October issue of the Quarterly Review in the next few days. It should be hitting your mailboxes. But speak here while we have you. Speak here on the active engagement in our community that challenges injustices and advocates for policy changes.
Okay, so I'm trying to think of an example that we can walk through. Everything that we do every day came down to a vote. Everything from where we live, the water we drink, the house we live in, schools we go to, all came down to a vote. The stores. How this affects us, and I want to make sure that I'm going to answer the question without going left. When we vote for a county commissioner. We vote for city council members. If you're in a community and there's a food desert, that means that's an under-resourced community for you not to have a store to buy food. That came down to a vote. That came down to a vote to close a store. That came down to a vote to bring a store in. Where I live, since you talked about Spartanburg, South Carolina, the south side of Spartanburg, those that are on here from South Carolina, those that are from Spartanburg, there used to be a Carver Junior High School. This is the south side of Spartanburg. And there used to be, it started out as a community cafe. It became a Piggly Wiggly. I think now it's Save More, but for a while, I think after the Piggly Wiggly, there was no store. There was not a grocery store on the south side, but yet the hospital and Wofford College was taking up houses in Black and brown communities. My grandmother's house that I used to have to drive by, it disappeared one year. And I'm like, what is happening? But you can build all of this not even 2 blocks from the south side, and yet you can't get a grocery store into the south side. But we got on that south side, there were 4 check advance places. There was 2 ABC stores. There was a City Trends, but there was not a food. There was not groceries. You couldn't get fresh food. The citizens had to take a bus to Walmart or a bus downtown, and then take another bus to go to Walmart. That's how far they had to go for groceries. And a lot of them, because that was more of the what we call projects, Section 8, those that were on income-driven housing, did not have cars. And so now you have a food desert. Now, most of the hospitals, you had to get on a bus, public transportation, that only ran till 5:30. And so now you are not having access to resources, services. All that came down to a vote. And so if wanting us to say that voting doesn't matter, voting doesn't count, we should not be civically engaged. Your livelihood, your everyday life depends on you being actively civically engaged. And the church can't stay silent. I was mad at the churches that did not go down to City Hall and have a non-violent protest, because it took almost 10 years for a grocery store to be put on the south side. Why would you do that? Why would you know that? And we got all these other subsidies that were being built not 2 blocks away, not 2 blocks away. So when we say how voting affects everyday life, how voting affects civic engagement, how we should continuously be civically engaged, that's a main example. We're not even going to talk about the school, because Carver and Mary H. Wright, which was the elementary school down there, became a resource center. Where did all those young kids go? Those young kids are still there, but they had to be bused to another place because they closed down that school. So when we're looking at those things, when we're looking at the church, when we're looking at being, and it does not, you don't have to have an education. This is another thing that I want people to know. You don't have to have a college education to be civically engaged. You just got to know your rights and be able to speak up for them. And once you know your rights, you'll be able to say, no, what we're doing here is not right. What can I do? What can I do to help change this? That's how you change societal reform. We finally got that grocery store there. How do we get that? Because we have been petitioning the city council to say enough is enough. And we got enough faith leaders, praise God, that we had enough faith leaders, enough community leaders to continuously petition for that grocery store to be down there now. So
once you started petitioning, it took 1-2 months for the city to allow that to happen? What kind of engagement needs to take place?
Be not weary in well doing. Be not weary. It's going to take time, but it's got to be persistent time. You can't do it one time and think that they're going to believe it. You're not going to be able to do it a couple of times and they say, oh, we got it, we're going to make change. No, you got to continuously be in the forefront. You got to continuously bring attention to it. You got to continuously put it out there to saying, hey, this is wrong. We would not have civil rights if it wasn't for the boycott. They had been talking about civil rights before that. Am I correct? My historians that are on, they have been talking about the right to vote. They have been talking about treating us as equals. We've been had that conversation, but it wasn't until it was brought to the forefront on a repeated basis of the horrendous treatment of African Americans before it's like, oh, we got to do this. We got to change this. Now it's out there. It's in the forefront. They can't hide anymore. That's how you have to bring all these things to attention, and you can do it. You don't have to do it by yourself. That's another thing I want us to know. You don't have to do it by yourself. There are some like-minded individuals that just need a push. You got some that'll work on the background that can get you your data, your researchers, your facts. You got that other person that has that connection with tables that you might not be a part of. And then you have that person that will be in the front. That's their personality to bring all that out. Bring your team together and begin to bring those petitions. I know there's something happening in Fayetteville with some land that they had money allocated to that land, and yet they have not done anything to it. That's being brought to the attention now. Now that's going to be at the General Assembly on the floor because that group of people have been continuously petitioning the governor, continuously asking for that audience. So that can happen. Something is happening in Nevada where they're wanting to buy up land that has graves on it to put a casino, and it is a Black community. So they're petitioning the governor. They finally got the governor's attention and saying, hey, if you don't do this, we're going to lay it down here before y'all even try to take this land. But you have to bring it to the forefront, and that's what you can do. It's not going to happen overnight. Do not believe that. Do not think that. But you have to continuously you got to continue to persevere. You got to continuously be persevering for it.
Okay. We welcome you tonight to Practical Conversations for the Life of the Church. Our conversation tonight is on civic engagement in the Black church. Our guest is the Reverend Dr. Hanna R. Broome, who is the National Religious Director for Repairs of the Breach and also Director of Project 100. Reverend Broome, as we draw towards a close to our conversation, you were just speaking on engaging in civic affairs for the long haul. It's going to take time. We have to be persistent. We have to keep at it. How can you help us to organize and strategize for this type of long-term engagement?
So join Project 100. That's number one. Number two is really researching the rights of your state, researching what you're trying to bring attention to. We don't want to be loud and wrong. That's one of Bishop Barber's main things, us as organizers, us as mobilizers. If we're out here and we're talking and we're speaking and we're calling things out, we got to make sure our data is correct. So don't listen to the sound bites. Don't, run. It sounds good in your ear and you want to get out here and be the prophetic voice with a bullhorn, and you're completely wrong. Make sure what you're saying, what you're wanting, what you're asking for, you have the data to back it up. If this is the injustice that you're seeing that's being done, find out why it's the injustice. I might not like it. And everything legal is not right. So we got to make sure we also understand that as well. So if you're going to bring attention to a situation, make sure you know the background of it. If you know that there's pollution happening in a community, make sure you understand where's the pollution coming from. Was it there before and not looked at? Make sure you've done your research before you bring anything to the attention of any of your city officials. Make sure you know the background of it. That would be another way. And then once you have all of that, once you have that sound case, begin to have conversations with people that are connected. Sometimes you got to have that voice on the inside of the General Assembly, or that page, that's the senator's page. Sometimes you have to have that name to be able to even begin to have an audience. And so know who you can go to with this. We have some amazing representatives. Shout out to those representatives that's standing on business and that's truly uplifting people. You have those representatives that really are trying to do the righteous thing, the right thing, to fight injustice. Let's connect with them and begin to plan how we're going to bring this to the forefront. How are we going to bring this to the floor? How do I write a petition? How do I write and get minutes where I can ask questions? You can have that. You can do that, and we can help you with that. So you're able to change things. You have that power.
And this is nonpartisan, isn't it?
Absolutely. It is not about left or right, red or blue, green or yellow. It is about policy. It is about legislation. It is about what is being passed into law that lifts up all and not just a few. So it's not about what political party you're a part of. It is about what is right, what is just. That is basic. It's not about personalities. It's about policy. How do we change policy? Being in poverty is policy driven. Nobody wakes up and choose to be poor. Nobody wakes up and choose to be ostracized. Nobody wakes up and choose to have their civic rights taken away from them. Nobody does that. That is legislated. And so we have to change legislation. How do we do that? We got to learn and know what it is first, know what our rights are, and then we can begin to petition to have those changes.
And we need to build coalitions within our legislative branches. We need to get persons both on our side and those who are opposed to us. Sometimes we have to advocate most with those who are opposed to us to get them to understand what our position is and why they should join us.
Absolutely. Finding that common ground, as the director of religious affairs, and I'm going into so many different faith communities, learning. You'll laugh at this. I wanted to be a Quaker. Once I found out.
Oh yes, we got to have that peace moment.
Once I found out, what it was for a Quaker, because I never had been exposed to a Quaker. Probably did and didn't even know what it was. But being in these faith communities and understanding the language, there's some things that they stand strong on. I'm against this, that, and the third. And then there's some over here, I'm against this. And so I had to bring all these beautiful minds together and say, okay, out of 10 of these pivotal civil rights points, you don't like 3 and you don't like 2. Can we all agree on the 7? Can we all agree on the 6? If the 6 lifts us up and shows human dignity for each person, then let's go with the 6. So you're not going to get everybody on board for everything. But if you find that commonality, find that one point that says this is what connects us. Humanity connects us. It is not about family. It is not about blood. Humanity. That is the only race. And I know Dr. Broadnax will break down race as a social construct and all of that. But we are the human race. That's what connects us. And so if we begin to look at laws that lift up humanity, for all, not just a few, but for all. If I can lift up 80% of people out of poverty, if I can lift up 80% that they have living wages and not slave wages of $2.10 or $4.25 or $7.25, but an actual living wage. If I can lift up 80% of that, that is amazing in itself. So I might not agree on all 10. You're not going to get, so I don't know anybody who can get anybody, a group of people, to agree on all 10. But if we sit down, whether we're for this or against this, those that are against us, if we sit down and look at that commonality, even if it breaks down to 3, if it deals with the dignity of human beings, then I can work with you. But if your policies oppress others and myself, then I can't rock with you. But if we can come to a common agreement that we want the humanity and the dignity of all, then yes, let's begin to have some conversation. We're not going to get all 10, but if I can get 8, or if I can get 6, and we all can agree to that, then that's the starting point. And that's how you begin to have those conversations. So even if your elected officials were not who you voted for, there is a level of commonality that you can begin to have conversations with. If there's communities, that faith communities that you want to support, and that, more people bringing together for that common, the well-being of all, and then you begin to approach elected officials, find the commonality. I will always say that, find that commonality. All of our sacred texts, from Hindu, Buddhism, Islam, Sikh, Jewish, Christian, the common thread that I have found is love, justice, and mercy. I've found that in all of those different faith communities. So when I'm in these spaces, those are the 3 things I talk about. I don't talk about all other traditions. Those are the 3 things: What does your faith belief say about love? What does your faith belief say about justice? What does your faith belief say about mercy? Because that is the interwoven, interconnected of all of us.
Unfortunately, we need to draw this conversation to a close. We are so happy to have had Dr. Hanna Broome tonight to talk with us about civic engagement. But before we close, Dr. Broome, would you give us again information about your upcoming meeting of Project 100 and how we might get in contact with you?
Yes. So Project 100, if you want to be a part of Project 100, the email to send to me is A like Apple, M like Mary, E like Elephant, Z like Zoo, Project 100 at gmail.com. Send me an email to say, hey, I want to be a part of Project 100. I will add you to the distribution list and we can begin to have some conversation. If you want to reach out to me, same way. Just say, hey, I need to have a conversation with you. Hey, could you, do a recording? Do a recording. I do not have a problem having conversations about this. This is a part of my life. This is who I am. And so I am so thankful for the space and this time that you have allowed me to be with you on tonight.
We're thankful to have had you tonight, and we're so thankful that you would take the time out of your schedule, particularly as we're so close to this election, to come and talk to us tonight about civic engagement in the local communities, and particularly the responsibility of a Black church. This conversation tonight builds upon the article by Dr. Broome in the upcoming edition of the Quarterly Review. Those of you who subscribe to the Quarterly Review, you should receive your edition within the next few days. I got mine in the office today. We are looking forward to the rest of the, it's snail mail. So we hope that you will get yours within the next few days. If you are not a subscriber to the Quarterly Review, you can contact me at this email address, editor, editor, editor at the Quarterly Review. Make sure you have the Quarterly Review.org. We'll be happy to see that you receive a subscription to the Quarterly Review and be able to read not just the article from Dr. Broome, but the other articles as we continue to do our best to inform and to engage Zion in affairs both religious, theological, and civic. Dr. Broome, we thank you tonight for joining us for this practical conversation. We wish our strongest and most gracious blessings upon you as you not only engage your ministry, but as we work for a most better, just future for us all. Thank you for tonight, and thank you for joining Practical Conversations.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Broadnax. I truly appreciate it.